This news coming out of Madison, Wisconsin, it's just, especially so close to Christmas, a shooting at a Abundant Life Christian school,
Yeah.
just leaves you reeling, trying to process the enormity of it all.
Right. I think it's in those moments where piecing together the facts and understanding the timeline almost becomes our way of processing the unimaginable.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got a lot of information from various news sources to sift through. So what can you tell us about what happened at Abundant Life?
Well, the initial reports came in around 10:57 a.m. on December 14th. And the response from law enforcement was incredibly swift. They were on scene and entering the school within minutes.
Wow.
And critically, they did not discharge their weapons. The shooter, who has been identified as a juvenile student, was found deceased at the scene.
7 people were transported to local hospitals, and sadly, we know 5 lives were lost, including the shooter. What more can you tell us about the casualties?
Yeah, so the police chief during the press conference mentioned a range of injuries among those transported. Some less severe, others, unfortunately, life-threatening.
In the midst of all this horror, the one thing that really jumped out at me from the reports was the emphasis on preparedness.
Absolutely. The police chief highlighted that they conduct active shooter drills almost every quarter. But there's another layer to this. A specialized medical team happened to be training just 3 miles away when the shooting occurred.
Oh, that's...
Their immediate response, putting their training into practice, undoubtedly saved lives that day.
It's just a chilling reminder that hoping for the best doesn't mean we shouldn't also prepare for the worst, especially for first responders. Those drills, that constant training, it makes all the difference.
And it also speaks volumes about the need for investment in those resources. We have to equip our first responders with the tools and the training that they need because their level of preparedness can literally mean the difference between life and death.
The news reports also capture the raw emotion of the aftermath. A reunification center was set up for families. Can you talk about that a bit?
Yeah, those images are heartbreaking. Parents frantically searching for their children, the uncertainty and fear in their eyes.
Right.
It speaks to the wider impact of this tragedy, not just on the immediate victims, but on the entire community.
And the police chief touched on that, saying, quote, "Every child, every person in that building is a victim and will be a victim forever."
Wow.
The ripple effects of this kind of trauma are so profound and long-lasting.
Absolutely. And that underscores the need for ongoing support, counseling, resources to help individuals and the community heal. It's a long road, and the need for those resources won't fade anytime soon.
The police chief also called for unity within the community. It's a common thread that we see in the wake of these events. Why do you think that is?
I think there's something incredibly powerful in shared grief and resilience. It's a reminder that even in the face of unimaginable darkness, hope exists. And strength can be found in coming together and supporting one another.
Of course, there's still so many unanswered questions. Things we just don't know yet.
We don't know the motive behind the shooting, the type of weapon used. And out of respect for the families, details about the victims are still being withheld.
And those details are crucial to understanding not just what happened, but why. Hopefully, as they emerge, they can point us towards ways to prevent this from happening again.
Right. The investigations are ongoing, and as more information comes to light, we'll hopefully get a clearer picture of the events leading up to the shooting and what, if anything, could have been done to prevent it.
The fact that this took place at a private Christian school, a place meant to be a haven, adds another layer of complexity. It makes you question the very spaces we consider safe.
It shatters the illusion that certain places are immune to this kind of violence. Schools, regardless of the religious affiliation, whether they're public or private, are supposed to be sanctuaries for learning and growth.
Right.
This forces us to confront the reality that evil can intrude upon even the spaces we hold most sacred. It challenges our assumptions about where these tragedies can occur.
Yeah.
It really makes us grapple with that unsettling truth that no place is truly immune to this kind of violence.
Yeah, you mentioned schools being considered sanctuaries, and the police chief echoed that, calling Abundant Life, quote, a refuge for students. What are your thoughts on the security measures or lack thereof in places like this, especially in light of the fact that this was a private school which may have different regulations than public institutions?
It's a complex issue, right? We instinctively want our schools to be welcoming environments, not fortresses. But the reality is that the safety of the students and educators has to be paramount. So finding that balance between security and maintaining an open, nurturing atmosphere is incredibly difficult.
It makes you wonder if those active shooter drills that the police chief mentioned are enough.
Yeah.
Or if, as a society, we need to be having much tougher conversations about what it really takes to secure our schools.
I think those conversations absolutely need to happen, and they need to involve everyone: school administrators, law enforcement, parents, the community at large. There's no easy solution, no one-size-fits-all answer. It's about weighing the risks, understanding the unique needs of each school and community, and finding solutions that prioritize safety without sacrificing the core purpose of education.
And while security measures are essential, I keep coming back to the police chief's statement about every person in that building being a victim.
Right.
That speaks to a much deeper wound, a societal one.
Yeah.
That goes beyond just fortifying buildings.
Absolutely. True security goes beyond physical barriers. We have to address the root causes of violence: mental health, social isolation, the normalization of aggression and violence in our media and online spaces. These are the cracks in our societal foundation that need urgent attention.
It's a massive undertaking, and it can feel overwhelming. Where do we even begin to tackle something this big?
It starts with a shift in perspective.
Yeah.
We need to move away from the reactive, what can we do after a tragedy mindset. We have to embrace a proactive approach. Prevention and intervention have to become our primary focus. Investing in mental health resources, fostering social connectedness, and creating environments that value empathy and conflict resolution, these are the building blocks of a safer future.
I'm struck by how the timing of this tragedy, so close to Christmas, adds another layer of heartbreak.
Right.
It makes you wonder about the long road to healing for this community.
It's hard to imagine celebrating a season of joy and peace with this weight hanging over the community. The healing process will be long and complex, not just for the families directly impacted, but for everyone who witnessed the events. For the first responders, the teachers, the students, everyone carries a piece of this trauma.
The police chief, in the midst of delivering those awful facts, seemed profoundly affected. It really humanized the situation, seeing him grapple with the weight of this tragedy, particularly its proximity to Christmas.
It was a powerful moment. You could see the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, the anguish for his community. But amidst the grief, there was also a powerful call for unity, a plea for the community to come together and support one another.
And that call for unity seems to be a universal response to tragedy. Why do you think that is?
I think in the face of unthinkable horror, we instinctively reach for connection. Shared grief, communal support, it becomes a lifeline. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, we are not alone, and that perhaps together we can find a path forward.
In all this darkness, the story about the special events medical team, training just 3 miles away and able to respond so quickly, it offers a glimmer of hope.
Right.
It speaks to the importance of preparation, even when it feels like we're preparing for the unthinkable.
It's a powerful example of how, even in the face of tragedy, training and preparedness can have a tangible impact, potentially saving lives. And it reinforces the need for ongoing investment in those resources, not just for law enforcement, but for medical professionals and even everyday citizens.
It's almost a call to action, to be more aware of our surroundings, to know how to respond in an emergency, and even to advocate for policies that prioritize safety and well-being in our communities.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that safety is a collective responsibility. We each have a role to play in creating safer environments, in fostering a culture of preparedness, and in supporting the resources and training that make these rapid, life-saving responses possible.
As we move forward, I keep circling back to the fact that this shooter was a juvenile student. It makes the question of motive all the more perplexing. What could drive a young person to such an act?
That's a question that weighs heavily on everyone's mind. It's one we may never fully understand. But we can't shy away from exploring the complexities of youth violence, the pressures young people face today, and the warning signs that often go unnoticed.
We've talked about mental health and social isolation as factors in the broader context of violence. But how do those specifically play into the issue of youth violence? I imagine the pressures are significantly different for them than for adults.
You're right. The landscape of adolescence is incredibly complex. Social media creates immense pressure to conform, to achieve an often unattainable ideal. Cyberbullying is rampant, and access to violent content online is ubiquitous.
And then you layer on top of that the very real mental health struggles that many teenagers face: depression, anxiety, feelings of isolation. It's a lot to navigate, and sometimes the support systems that should be there, they just aren't.
Exactly. And that's where prevention and intervention become so critical. We need to create environments where young people feel seen, heard, and supported. where mental health resources are readily available, and where open conversations about mental well-being are encouraged.
Hmm. I keep thinking about that statement from the police chief about this tragedy being a catalyst for reflection and change. It's easy to get caught up in the immediate aftermath, but what does that long-term reflection and change look like, in your opinion?
Well, I think it's about shifting our focus from reaction to prevention. We can't just wait for another tragedy to strike before we act. It's about honestly assessing our societal structures, our cultural norms, and identifying the factors that contribute to a climate of violence.
We've touched on so many of those factors: gun control, mental health resources, the impact of media and social media. But it seems like such a monumental task to address these issues.
Right.
Where do we even begin?
I think it starts with recognizing that this is a shared responsibility. It's not just the job of lawmakers or educators or mental health professionals. It's on all of us to foster a culture of empathy, respect, and conflict resolution, to model those values in our own lives and communities.
So much of what we've discussed today is about confronting difficult realities. The reality of violence, the reality of mental health struggles, the reality that our society is, in many ways, broken. But amidst all that darkness, do you see any glimmers of hope?
I do. I see hope in the resilience of the community, in the outpouring of support for the victims and their families, in the commitment of law enforcement and first responders to keeping our communities safe. I see hope in the young people who are speaking out about mental health, demanding change, and advocating for a more peaceful future.
And there's hope in the very fact that we're having this conversation,
Right.
that we're shining a light on these issues, refusing to turn away from the uncomfortable truths that they expose.
Absolutely. Silence is complicity. It's only by engaging in open and honest dialogue, by challenging our own assumptions, and by actively working towards solutions that we can hope to create a world where tragedies like this become unthinkable.
This has been a heavy conversation, but a necessary one. The shooting at Abundant Life Christian School is a stark reminder of the fragility of life, the pervasiveness of violence, and the urgent need for change. But it's also a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, the power of community, and the hope that even in the darkest of times, we can find the strength to move forward together towards a brighter future.